Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. And if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you live and what you do.
Well, hey, Dan. My name is Tomer Soran. I own Effortless Hire, a virtual assistant staffing agency, and I'm living here in Austin, Texas, in the U.S.
Awesome. So, Tomer, if you can tell me kind of how you got started in this industry, what made you want to go out and start this company?
Certainly. So I think an abbreviated story arc of my life that led us here. I started as a structural engineer in New York City. I was designing skyscrapers and working on tall buildings. And I left that to jump into the entrepreneurial space and focus primarily on the e-commerce world for the last 10 years. Now, that is still running in the background, but throughout that whole time, I had virtual assistant staff because it's very difficult to actually run and operate an e-commerce business without some virtual teams. And I built the engine to place people for my internal team and to manage and best practices. And enough of my founder friends were asking for the favor of, hey, can I use your thing? Can you place? Like, yes, favor, until I got overwhelmed and realized that there was an actual business there. And so from that, Effortless Hire was born. And since then, we've added a lot more infrastructure, success elements, and educational pieces too, to help both sides succeed and kind of really improve the habits for everyone involved, both the staff that we help place and for the owners and team leaders who need to manage them.
That's awesome. So obviously nowadays becoming a very competitive space. There's lots of companies popping up, I feel like all the time that are competing with, like Effortless Hire, virtual assistants, right? So how do you compete and set yourself apart in this, competitive market?
Certainly. I think a lot of it ends up being about doing it correctly from multiple angles, but heavily on the front end of selecting the correct person. Right. And I think a lot of companies often are purely about speed and trying to get you something that you've asked for. I personally and my team take a lot of care of really interviewing our clients and potential clients to understand what they think they need and give as much consultative advice about what we think would work best for them within the scope of their business. Oftentimes, a lot of people will come in wanting something over here, and I go, cool, why aren't you addressing that project? And they'll maybe waffle and say, well, I'm so busy with XYZ. That's usually the light bulb moment for people when we realize where the actual choke points in the business is. Because oftentimes they'll go, yeah, I really want someone to come in and help me do all these sales or marketing elements. I'm like, cool. What happens if I gave you 10 more clients tomorrow? They're like, oh, I might jump off a bridge. And I'll be like, cool. Well, water's cold. No need. Pardon that joke. But the point is they're already feeling overwhelmed with fulfillment and pipeline or some element of their business, that clearing more time for them to operationalize and focus on the next project ends up being one of the core places that we start before we then push on adding more influx. It depends. Every business is completely different. And that's part of our magic, is really going in and using our operational knowledge from all these different businesses and saying, let's get to know you. Let's understand, how do you like to operate? I think another big thing that people forget is it's not just a person who can do the job, it's a person who can do the job that you want to spend time with. Because if you don't like the people you work with, it's like, what's the point?
Right. That's true. I mean, yeah, I guess like, how do you know, right, if it makes sense to hire somebody as a VA versus like in-house or here in the US? Like, yeah, if there's like a headcount opening, what do you kind of like advise people, like when it's a good fit to go with you versus bring something in-house here in the States?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, the conversation's worth having, and then we give the advice accordingly. I'm very careful about placing without the actual need being there. And I think there's a few things that happen, circumstances that we're not relevant for, right? Or that a VA is not applicable for. I think oftentimes people reach for a VA when they need a sprint or a strategy. And I think that's the time to pull in an expert. And whether that's a local expert or marketing, specialist, or someone who builds systems or builds a store or something of that nature, right? That might be just a sprint move, and you hire a local professional, or you hire someone from Upwork, Fiverr, something like that. That's just like a one-off gig.
Right.
Then when you want something that's going to be long-term operational, that's usually where we like to place our VAs. And that can be in all the different departments, right? There's operations involved in the sales and marketing, through the actual fulfillment and admin, through customer success and onwards, as well as those kind of Swiss Army knives that will help the executive. So sometimes I will ask them, the owners, we'll look at the whole structure and say, cool, is it worth you adding a whole nother person in, like another head locally that would multiply your team? Or what if we gave this team, every single person in it, another 10% of or 30% of efficiency by removing the stuff that they shouldn't be doing because they have junk work potentially.
Right.
If we gave that team or one or two of those people an assistant, could they get 5, 10 more deals, clear, or do the fulfillment on those other projects? That's a great leverage point. The other piece is anything that can be done virtually can be managed by a VA or an EA. And it's realistically going to be generally more economic to do so. If you need like a thought leader in your team, potentially that might be somebody that you really want to bond and connect with locally. Like a second founder, find it for very much in-house. If you need a team leader, it depends on what those operations are. So I think it's always worth the conversation. And worst case, we come to a point where like, that is a US type person, or realistically, that's an AI or software system, or that's an AI or software system with a VA who manages that and operates it throughout the team. Oftentimes, that's kind of the golden mix. Is like people know that they need this new software, like a new CRM. They know they need it. They don't have it, but they do not, for the life of them, want to run and do all the data entry and cleanup and management and reminders and all those tasks, or a social media platform, potentially.
Yeah. So essentially, I mean, so what I'm understanding is that like they need to have a good system, they need to have ideas in place. And then once the system is there, then the VA can come in and like do the fulfillment, help out with the system. But it's like they're not going to come in and build a system. You have to have a good system first, and they can come in and help kind of add value and save you time with the system that you already have in place.
I think that there are some who are able to help you build that system, but if you don't know what you want in the first place, it can be hard to direct. And the best bang for your buck is to like spend it on someone who's purely strategy and systems, and then team up with someone like us or one of their partners, and then put in an operational person to run that. And that's kind of why, at least lately, we end up partnering with a lot of, shops or different types of referral partners, like, fractional COOs or EOS implementers and things like that, who are there and they love digging in and helping build out those like pieces, but they're not going to run them. They're like, cool, I built it. I got to go build one for another company. I'm not going to be there day in, day out and button push, etc. for you. And that's kind of where we end up teaming a lot, because that's a nice partnership for that.
That's awesome. So in terms of like, certain verticals or skill sets, like, can you just talk more about that? Like, what are some of the expertises that you have within your organization?
Sure. So even though we have a pretty deep talent pool, every time we have a new role, I like to refresh it. And so, because I want to match someone who's not just the right expertise, but I want someone who has the right experience relevant to the expertise, and the personality match, as we mentioned earlier. So that always matters, because everybody has a slightly different mix. It's like, oh, I need, for example, we'll go through the different categories. So from marketing, definitely on the creative side, plenty of video editors, graphics, and social media managers, someone to help you or take your raw stuff and turn it into something that is presentable, right? You obviously have people who help you with this podcast, etc. Similar vibes. And that helps you be the thing that you are most important to be, which is the face and the voice and the personality with that. But you should be on as many podcasts as possible, not sitting and editing them.
Right.
So that's on that side, but we also place people for PPC management, SEO, for email and newsletter, especially within like the CPG world. There's a
Right.
lot of different elements that are constantly there. And a lot of those people are actually very, very used to doing a lot of the strategy or the optimization elements of it. Are they
Right.
going to be able to go and film your content in person? No, they're not there, right?
Right.
But you
Right.
can hire gigs or you can do that and bring it to them and they can run 1,000 A/B tests for you.
Right.
That's on the marketing side. On the sales side, we've definitely placed a lot of SDRs, BDRs, people like that. A lot of, yes, cold calling, but I think that's actually less and less popular and less effective these days. I actually think I lean more towards like the LinkedIn outreach and management, which ends up being like, I think a lot of people are spammed with with, hey, you want to buy this, want to buy this? I'm a big fan of slow build relationship LinkedIn. I think that is it's a longer sales cycle, but
Right.
you have a much more comfortable thing. And I treat it like it's actual networking. Like,
Right.
cool, let's chat like we would normally.
Right.
Yes, it's okay to talk shop and business because we both enjoy doing that. It's okay not to just talk about, what'd you eat for lunch or whatever it is. But so that's in the business dev. I think the other big thing that helps with sales, we often work with a lot of like home services businesses. And so many of them that I talk to, they don't have anyone really manning the phones
Right.
or
Yep.
personing the phones. It's like, and just that loss of lead opportunity is so substantial.
Oh, for
And
sure.
having somebody to do that or to manage your dispatch or your calendar or just to quickly call after somebody fills in your form. Just somebody to handle those. We've multiplied multiple people's businesses like almost overnight because of they just were able to manage suddenly leads that they weren't able to before because
Right.
they were busy fulfilling. There's so many awesome service providers who are just like, yeah, I handle the phone while I'm doing whatever it is for the service. It's like you
Yeah.
should be focused on your work and on being on good customer service in person and let someone else handle the dispatch in that. So that's on the sales side. Fulfillment, we do help like a lot of e-commerce. So for example, store management sometimes. Because I have 10 years of e-commerce experience, I know that world very well. So
Right.
I'm very good at smelling the bullshit a little bit, and being able to tell it, right? So e-commerce management, supply chain, ordering your inventory, managing
Right.
that, the books, what else is there through customer success and service, obviously,
Right. Right.
responding to things. I think everyone goes, well, AI can do that. I'm like, yes, they can. Someone's got to manage and still monitor it. And so what all of those tools do is just give everybody superpowers. So instead of you needing 5 VAs like you used to, you can do it all with one. And
Right.
so that's great. Or you can do one in a department and they can
Right.
basically run that whole arm of your business, which is
Right.
fun.
For sure. So what's been the biggest way that you've grown this business? Like how have you gotten about getting new clients?
I would say one, I very much enjoy going out and meeting people. So the network and continuing that energy through LinkedIn has been very effective for me. But everyone has different superpowers and different ways to do so. And I'd say the other big element is working with those consultants and operation specialists, et cetera, because we speak the same language. They know they're talking to these business owners, and when the business owner gets on the call and they go, "How's it going?" and they just go, that that panicked or heaviness, they can feel it, and they know the solution is to clear their time.
Right.
And so that's kind of where being a resource for them ends up everybody wins because the client is obviously happy because their things are taken care of.
Right.
The ops or consultant is much happier because they have a happier client and
Right.
their advice has actually been listened to. I think that's the biggest problem is most people give good advice and then don't see it. They're like, cool, it's been 2 months. Did you do any of the stuff we talked about? And they go, no.
Yeah,
And so that kind of helps that. And yeah, I'm a big triple win fan as much as possible in all
for
my
sure.
businesses.
So speaking of advice, what would you say is the one biggest piece of advice that you wish you knew before you started this business?
I think it is to understand yourself in terms of where do you naturally gravitate your energy. So for me, I naturally do enjoy speaking with people and writing. And so because as a business owner, a lot of your work, especially in the beginning and for a while, is business development.
Right.
I would say try and write that out and isolate what it is that are your ways that how do you connect with people the most and what do you do
Yeah.
naturally even for yourself
Right.
most easily, right? And then go, cool, which of these platforms has that for me? And so for a while I was really focused on Instagram because I thought that's where people go to market services, etc. And then I realized that it's fine, but I'm not here for just like someone to jump on, click, see it one time and jump in. Like the relationship build is so much longer. And I'm also a more comfortable writer. Like I've always enjoyed writing and now I have a good outlet to with LinkedIn. And so identifying that may shortcut a little bit because regardless, I think you know this well, pick an avatar and pick a platform and just
Yeah.
focus on that before you hit the next one. There's $1 billion to make right there before you get to the next one. It's fine. Like
Exactly.
even if most people have barely scratched the surface and they jump to the next hack or place that they've been told to be because everyone's on TikTok. It's like that might be the right thing for your business, right? But maybe it's not. And if you're not the right person for a role, put someone else in it. That's
Exactly.
fine. I'm not a video editor. I immediately hired that out. And I also had the other thing is like for example, on Instagram, I've always had that issue of like actually hitting post. There was some sort of visceral problem with it. And so I just gave that to somebody else to do. So I didn't have to. I'm like, yeah,
Right.
that's approved. Cool. And then a week later, you're like, oh, I guess I posted 4 times.
Right.
Great.
Right.
For LinkedIn, it seems easier for me.
Yeah.
It's a little more stream of consciousness. And I think I'm more confident in those things.
Right.
So I think that to synthesize that, it's try and better. Most of us understand our strengths from like a business perspective, but try and understand your strengths from a marketing perspective potentially, and then pick the channel in the same way that you might pick the product that lends your skills best to it. Think about that as well from the marketing channel, because you can potentially succeed in almost all of these.
Right.
The ones that are going to give you the biggest returns initially are going to be the ones that you have the easiest time sticking with
Right.
and have the least amount of friction for because you'll get to the other ones.
For sure. So if we're going to have this conversation again in 1 year from now, where do you see things going for your business?
Sure. I think one of the biggest things is I think a lot of it will be in me replacing myself with even further people in certain ways. For example, I think, and we've already had success about this in the past when I took a vacation, I put another salesperson in place and it worked well. But what I realized and my instinct was kind of right is that for a business like myself that I really enjoy the consultative element in the beginning, I'm not going to hire a salesperson. I'm going to hire a coach because I want someone who's used to and enjoys digging into businesses. And so I think we'll have a little bit more of that, as well as more of an internal community of kind of all our clients and people who are fans of ours, as
Right.
well as in the new year, we're aiming at launching more of a newsletter and probably our own show that I would love to have you on. But we're still deciding on the strategy that we want to aim at, because I think that always matters. But I love this show that you're doing here, Dan. I think
Thank you. Thank you.
it's awesome that you have this and are consistent. And I really appreciate you being kind enough to invite me to it and getting a
Sure.
chance to chat.
My pleasure. And if somebody watching this wanted to reach out to you, do you mind sharing your website, social media, I guess best ways to get in contact?
Absolutely. You can always visit effortlesshire.com and you'll find the link to book some time. If you want to connect with me personally and do it there, you can do so on LinkedIn, Tomer Soran, TomerSoran, and we'll chat. I'm always happy to connect with more people and learn about new businesses. That's kind of one of my favorite things about all this is having been in e-commerce for so long. It was just like, you like this widget? You want this widget? Do you want this whiteboard? Yes? No? Okay, cool. Well, now I get to actually dig into people's companies and it fits my curiosity, which I love.
Awesome. Well, Samir, thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure, Dan. We'll talk soon.